Hi, I'm Umbreon Libris, and welcome back to the Pokemon Creature Design Review, the first episode in this series in over 2 years. In my first 6 months of YouTube, this single series made up pretty much 50% of all my videos. You can still watch the full playlist here. The videos may be a little bit dated, but I think overall they hold up pretty well. The premise is pretty straightforward. Today we'll talk about what I think are some of the best designed Pokemon from Generation 8, and then in the next episode, probably coming out in 2 weeks, we'll talk about the worst ones. What I'm not going to include are Gigantamax forms and regional forms because I've already made videos with my thoughts on those. I also did this video a year ago on the overall trends of Pokemon design from Generation 8, so if you haven't seen that, you might want to, but here's the recap. Overall, the design philosophy from Generation 8 seems to combine the more cartoony approach from other modern generations, with more stylized eyes and more exaggerated body proportions, with the more toned down designs from older generations in terms of how many details they have and even how many colors they have. Sometimes it works really well, sometimes it doesn't, and of course not every single Pokemon follows this. I want to make it clear that I'm not going to focus on my favorite Pokemon. There's no such thing as being objective when it comes to art, but I'm trying to approach it not so much from the angle of which ones appeal the most to me personally, and instead from the angle of which ones I think are well done, in terms of how they fit within the overall Pokemon aesthetic, or how well they represent their basic concepts, or how well they work as creatures, or even within the context of their evolutionary families, that kind of thing. So I'm not going to spend too much time gushing over how adorable Hattrem is, or how much I love Toxtricity. Although there is a lot to Toxtricity that I think is fantastic, like how well it incorporates the elements of punk style, like the spiked belt and bracelets, and the torn pants. And then there's the way it moves exactly like a gangly punk teen, the electric crest that is also a mohawk, or the chest protrusions that work as a guitar or a bass. And even the choice of electric and poison type to reflect the high energy and often drug-fueled lifestyle of punk rockers in the 1970s. I said I wasn't going to spend much time on it, but oh well. The 4 fossil Pokemon of Galar I think also deserve a mention here. They are abominations, but they are such successful abominations. They're meant to reference the Bone Wars in the early days of paleontology, when scientists were a bit haphazard, or careless you might say, and made a lot of mistakes when reconstructing dinosaur skeletons. And I love how creatively the parts are put together. Arctozolt is assembled like a land creature when its feet are clearly fins. Arctovish has the head upside down, and Dracovish takes it a step further and has the head on the wrong way on the tip of its tail. Dracozolt is the only one where it sort of makes sense anatomically, which is why I think it's the more boring combination, but the size discrepancy between the parts is still pretty comical. Regidrago, and especially Regieleki, I think are the most successful of the Regis. The whole idea of the Regis is that they are molded and animated from natural materials. Regirock does communicate that fairly well, but Regice doesn't really look like naturally formed ice, and Registeel looks industrially manufactured, definitely not the kind of thing you just scrunch together. Regidrago is supposed to be made from crystallized dragon energy, like whatever that means, but I do like that its arms are a dragon skull. It feels like a creative use of the scrap parts that Regigigas, or whoever made it, would have had available. And Regieleki really looks like a bunch of boundless energy that is tied together to keep it from falling apart. Almost like if you made a doll from, like, grass or something and some string. And honestly, Regieleki is the only one that really looks alive to me. It still has the more robotic looking eyes, but the way that it hops around really makes me think that it's a doll that someone made and it came to life. You know, bug-type Pokemon have had some of the most consistently good designs in the entire franchise. Maybe it's because of how varied arthropods are, so they're really flexible to design with, so you can incorporate all kinds of weird design elements and still have them fit together cohesively and not look out of place on what's supposed to be a natural creature. I think every generation has had at least one fantastic bug-type Pokemon. The bugs from Unova are some of the best Pokemon from that generation, same with the bugs from Alola, and Galar is no different. And they've got good range too, everything from the really simple and really adorable Snom to the much more complex Orbeetle, which is probably the best designed Pokemon in the whole generation. Loxton has already done a whole 15-minute video on Orbeetle, which you can watch if you haven't already, but there's a few things that I find really impressive about it. The first is how many different elements there are to the concept of this family. There's the superficial reference to ladybugs and the rather obvious growth from nerdy child to mad scientist supervillain. But there's also references to radar technology, a weird old Japanese toy, mind-controlling wasps, and aliens and UFOs. Obviously, not all of these are evident in the design if you don't know to look for them, but that's partly because all of the elements fit together so perfectly. Nothing stands out. And everything that goes into the design, from what's been discovered at least, does have a concrete presence in the design, either in how it all comes together or in specific design details. Like the frail body and giant head of a mad scientist, or the glowing eyes that reference both the mind-controlling wasp and radar monitors. The third Galar bug, Centiscorch, is also really solid. It seems to be less complex, but I think that's part of its strength. I think it fits better with the overall Pokemon aesthetic and offers a really good balance between the simplicity of classic Pokemon designs and the detail of modern designs. I mean, it has too many tiny details to work well on a 56 pixel square sprite, but you can easily get its colors on a Gen 2 style sprite, and maybe even with something like Charizard's colors from Pokemon Yellow. But it also has those concrete design details that we see on something like Orbeetle. Maybe it isn't as cohesive, like I'm not sure why the reference to Kabuto helmets specifically, but visually it still works. There's the danger exclamation mark on the head, and the circles on the undersides that reference a hot plate or a stovetop burner, both of which are references to man-made things, but that still look really natural for an arthropod. And when it Gigantamaxes, it becomes a more clear reference to the Omukade, a giant man-eating centipede yokai, and it also coils up into the shape of a radiator. I really appreciate that balance, but there's another Pokemon that I think pulls it off the best. Flapple. Full disclosure, I have wanted more kind of run-of-the-mill, everyday sort of dragons, as opposed to most of them being pseudo-legendary or almost, so I like the Applin family for a lot of reasons. I think Appleton is the more popular of Applin's evolutions, and frankly it's impossible not to love it, but I think that Flapple is by far the more successful design. What makes Applin successful is the simple brilliance of its concept. It's a worm with an O that is also a worm with a Y, a kind of dragon that has no limbs, and it uses an apple for protection. And the way that its eyes poke out the top of the apple and resemble leaves is genius. Appleton takes that concept in a completely independent direction. It loses the serpentine body, most of the apple is missing, and its body has turned into a pie. And honestly, that feels kind of disconnected from Applin.
Appleton makes me question things.
Such as eating the flakes off its back?
Yeah, what the hell?
But Flapple, I think, is the perfect extrapolation from the Applin idea. It's still a worm that lives inside of an apple, but it's eaten all of the insides, and you can really tell by its puffed up cheeks. And it found a way to use the apple shell for more than just protection. All of the pieces are still there and they fit together when it closes up, but it has those two big chunks that function as wings. And again, it is such a simple design without falling for that excessively cartoonish look of some of the Pokemon that we're going to talk about in the next episode of the series. Flapple would fit right in with Generation 2, and the only reason I'm not saying Generation 1 is that it has two major colors that wouldn't work well on a monochrome sprite. Maybe the Generation 1 Flapple is the shiny, so it's all green. Flapple feels like a classic Pokemon design while still being completely fresh and original. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disagreement over which Pokemon I should have highlighted, so if you think I missed one or if any of my picks were off base, let me know in the comments.
Let him have it!
Thank you for watching, and thank you to my patrons, especially luxury patron Ethan from Chicago, and this month's newest patron, Megan Thayer. This year is very exciting with Pokemon's 25th anniversary coming up, but it's also still very uncertain, so your support means everything to me. I'll see you in the next chapter.